then the question came up, can I trust loss? Can loss mentor us when we experience a loss of a friendship, of a person, of a part of our life that we realize, that's gone. I thought I could hang on to it. I thought it was going to be permanent. And I see that it's dissolved, or it's in the process of dissolving. Trusting in a loss can be seen as creating a vacuum in us, but it also can be understood as giving us an opening that we never had before.
Hello, my name is Clay Boykin, and I'm in search of the new compassionate male. Just a short while ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to have another conversation with our friend, Dennis Slattery. These podcast episodes go deep, but I can tell you that the ones that Dennis and I have go so much deeper, and we never know where they're going to end up, but they always end up someplace good. So let's join that conversation. We're on here talking, and the times that we're able to sit over lunch, and I get home and Laurie says, well, what did you talk about? I don't know. Well, but how did it make you feel? Oh, I felt great. We just covered so many things. Well, what was it? Well, I don't know.
But we both know, and this is how I'd phrase it, both of us know that Eros was present, because the relationship between us and then the topics that we move through deepened. And that for me is when Eros is present. And when it's present in the classroom, the classes are terrific. They're animated. People are thinking through things, not to agree with each other, but to see what their own myth is offering up.
All right. Tell me more about Eros.
So one of my favorite books of Jung is the transcripts from a dream analysis seminars, 1928 to 1930. And Jung is with either two or three, I think it's two, other analysts. And they're taking dreams of maybe 5, 6 sentences. That's it. And then they're working them. And Jung is listening to translations, and he steps in and agrees, and then he steps back or he argues. So one dream about page 99 in this volume that is just scintillating reading. They're working on a man's dream who is in a questionable relationship with his daughter. And one of the analysts says, well, he's in an incestuous, erotic situation with his daughter. And Jung kind of slams his fist down and he says, no, he's in a deep relationship with his daughter, because Eros is about relationships. Now, it can get perverted into pornography, lust, greed, but he says Eros is the presence, that energy presence of relationships that bind people together. And the dream was the unconscious narrative, not about this man having a sex. The analyst wanted to literalize it into a sexual relationship, and Jung essentially said, no, it's symbolic of a relationship that's deep that this man has with his daughter. Boy, when I read that, Clay, I thought that is so helpful to understand. Now, in our culture, anything erotic is right away kind of Freudian, sexually based. But for Jung, it was always the symbolic. And that's why I've read one time, Clay, that he personally analyzed over 80,000 dreams in his professional life. Jung just was in the unconscious, not all the time, but that was his that was his default position,
That was
to
his
be in the unconscious.
That was his playground.
That was his playground. So anyhow,
Wow.
that's what helped me understand Eros as relationship.
Okay, well now, a couple of things. Well, first of all, what I hear you, for me, it translates to intimacy.
Absolutely.
The intimacy is,
Yeah.
to me, is almost synonymous with Eros. Okay, and in intimacy in a not in a sexual sense. I mean, it could be in a sexual sense, but intimacy in terms of you and I have an intimate relationship.
Yes.
It's powerful and it's deep and it's heart to heart.
It's heart to heart.
Okay, so I'm on track there. Now, was Eros a mythological person?
Yes,
God?
and yes, and the most famous that I know, and scholars who know more of the myth stories could add another, but it's in the Eros and Psyche myth that Eros reveals himself. His mother is Aphrodite, if my memory's serving me. And Eros comes to Psyche at night, and Psyche's sisters are very envious that Eros chooses Psyche and not them to visit at night. So they conjure, and Psyche trusts now. I'm thinking of our theme resonating over here.
Right.
So Psyche trusts them, and they, when Eros comes, he comes in darkness, and there's no light allowed. So the sisters say, tonight when he comes and he's sleeping, light a candle and take a look, because he's a grotesque, monstrous figure. And of course, Eros is this handsome, beautiful man, God. And so she does. And when Eros feels the light of, think of it, it's a lantern with, or it's an oil lamp. I'm just trying to grab some of these pieces. He awakens immediately, and she's startled, and 2 or 3 drops of that hot oil land on it. Oh, that's what wakes him up. That's what wakes him up, because she's startled at his beauty. And now she's trying to square the circle of her sisters telling her he's a monster. And she says, I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life. Well, when those drops of oil land on his skin, it startles him, and he shoots out the window. And then she is given tasks to perform by Aphrodite, his mother, in order to reclaim him. And all of these tasks that Psyche is given in a kind of individuation process, where she has to suffer the blisters of things that she says, I can't do this. But different animals, different figures come and assist her. And so she's able to accomplish them. So the story of Eros and Psyche is one of the richest in Greek mythology. And I'm sorry, I'm not pulling up more details. It's been a while since I've read it.
Oh, that's plenty good. That gives me a bread trail to follow.
Perfect. I'm always fascinated to play with those 2 or 3 drops of hot oil, because as she holds the lamp and sees him, she becomes so fascinated with his beauty that the lamp, just turns enough to spill the oil that awakens him.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't even flinch, but he shoots out the window. And then her task is to reclaim Eros. Yeah. It's a beautiful story, Eros and Psyche. And Eric Neumann has written magnificently on that myth, if you're interested. he's one of the best Jungian analysts, I think, that followed Jung, or worked with Jung, and then followed Jung's thinking.
And the myth of Eros and Psyche.
And I think it says something to us about our dream life in ways that I can't comprehend right now, but there's something about when we enter that dark space of the unconscious. Do we trust what we've been told about the unconscious, or do we try to have a direct human experience with the unconscious? So it's so ironic that the sisters who tell her this falsehood begins her process of individuation. It's like a via negativa.
Would it be, I guess what just came up to me is this going into the unconscious. There's an intellectual pursuit of the unconscious, which I don't think will get me too far. But there's an intimacy. If I can have an intimate relationship, develop an intimate relationship with my unconscious,
yes,
that opens a portal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Psyche seems to need Eros to begin that intimate contact with herself, but also with the larger world. Because when she sets out on these tasks, like Hercules sets out on his tasks, she sees, I am ill-equipped to do this by myself. So then it puts her into relationships with others, with ants and other figures that come in to help her separate wheat from chaff, something she can't do. So she's on the erotic road as she seeks Eros. I love it. I mean, there's the brilliance of the Greek myth. It's the process. The process itself is what you're seeking. If that, in that beautiful poetic way that myths speak to us.
I'm looking up something here. Yesterday, I was surprised. Well, first of all, it was my birthday.
Yes, happy birthday.
Thank you.
As I mentioned to you. Yes.
Yes, thank you. And my wife, Laurie, and two friends, they took me away at 11 a.m. And they said, just be ready to go at 11. Okay. And they took me off, and we went to the HEB Center up in Cedar Park to see Cirque du Soleil.
Oh my gosh.
And you know which one it was? It was Ovo.
Okay, don't know it.
It's about bugs.
Oh.
It's about bugs. And when you said she connected with the ants, the image of Ovo, because there was this huge egg on stage, and throughout the whole performance, in the background, there's some ant carrying an egg, and it's this interconnection of all the bugs together and all the acrobats and so.
Oh my gosh!
And that's what came to mind.
Oh my gosh! You got bugs on the mind.
I do.
I
do. It was a great performance.
Oh, we've seen 3 over our lifetime, and each one just left us breathless.
Yes.
It's just that they have a slice on fantasy that no one else can touch.
Yeah.
That's our experience has been.
Yes. I think the first one I saw was in 1998. And I think they came out in like 93 or 94.
Yes.
And
that's right.
Out of Montreal is where they're based out of.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Well,
saw one in
okay.
San Antonio, one in Las Vegas, and I can't remember the others. But anyhow,
Mm.
um, you know, musing on trust. After you and I had lunch and I came home, I wound up writing out 2 or 3 pages, and then I've even added to it. But I've suffered a loss recently, and I don't want to go into that. But what happened with me is that I asked myself, what does trust have to do with loss? And then the question came up, can I trust loss? Can loss mentor us when we experience a loss of a friendship, of a person, of a part of our life that we realize, that's gone. I thought I could hang on to it. I thought it was going to be permanent. And I see that it's dissolved or it's in the process of dissolving. Can I learn to trust the uncertainty that loss opens in us? So I just was, just kind of thinking through that. And I thought I'd bring it up with you to see how trusting in a loss can be seen as creating a vacuum in us, but it also can be understood as giving us an opening that we never had before.
Right.
So I was just musing. And to your point earlier, I wrote to myself, it's just not enough to simply trust in oneself. We have to have that trust in others who help us not only identify ourselves, but I think help us define ourselves. But without trust as a bedrock of, who you're going to tell your story to and who you might not want to tell your story to, is based on, do I trust this person?
Right.
So I came to this notion that trust promotes a common sense to things. Trust gives us a common ground.
As you're saying that, what comes to mind is the work that I've done on the topic of vulnerability.
Perfect.
Trust and vulnerability are so joined. And
yes,
Brene Brown, to stand in one's truth with an open heart, to be wholehearted is that end of the spectrum of vulnerability. And so if that's wholehearted, I say, when I use the term brokenhearted, is when I'm closed, when I'm not going to let you in, and I may be, out of fear because I don't trust you.
Yes.
And another side of that is I'm not going to let you in because I trust myself to know.
Yes, only, maybe.
Yeah, but I trust myself to know that I should not let you in.
Exactly.
And that spectrum between being closed-hearted and wholehearted, or broken-hearted and wholehearted, is
yes.
It's all wound. Which is wound around which? I think it's two pieces of a piece of rope.
Yes.
Trust and vulnerability wind around each other.
Yes. And on a large global scale right now, I think that Putin carries the archetype of the untrusting.
Yeah.
Nobody can be trusted. I alone kind of have the answer. And just from a mythic and psychological level, how that is enclosing him in a cocoon of his own making.
Mm-hmm.
and narrowing and suffocating. And how infernally painful it must be for any human being to feel that no one is trustworthy. And so they're forced back on their own solipsism. And it just spins around inside that cocoon with no Eros. In fact, Eros, I think, in that situation can be transformed into violent energy that just explodes out with no boundaries. So this is the flip side of Eros, where no relationships can eventuate in a response that's one of violence.
So Eros is an energy that's going to come out one way or the other.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of those primal centers in us that can split and go in either direction, either towards a benevolent, compassionate, your work and mine on a smaller scale. So trust is so connected to the ability to be compassionate. Without trust, I don't think one has the capability of being compassionate towards others.
And it's not necessarily trusting the other that I would be compassionate towards. I mean, that I don't have to trust the other person to be compassionate for them.
Okay.
That's a hard thing for me to grasp, but it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to trust somebody and to have compassion for somebody that you're close, that you're experiencing Eros with.
Yes.
But to have compassion for someone who is causing harm, and to see that below that action that's going on at the deeper level, there's a human being that's in pain.
That's right.
There's a suffering that's happening at a deeper level that's manifesting itself in damage to other people.
That's right.
And
so,
yeah.
Oh no, please.
Yeah. Well, so that's my point is if I can reach in to have compassion for that, it doesn't condone what the person's doing outwardly.
No.
And that's been a hard thing for me to really wrap my arms around. Intellectually, I can have compassion for the other person, but in my heart of hearts, no, I'm just as judgmental and damning as the next person might be.
Mm-hmm. That's where self-compassion, I think, really plays an important part. That's part of who I am, and that's part of some of the work that I still have to do within myself.
Yeah.
But I like your point of view there, because it suggests to me that being compassionate towards one that you don't trust could bring that person to trust you, in which case that might be the first step in breaking out of this negative energy field that they occupy, isolated and alone, like Dante lost in the dark wood at the beginning of the poem.
Yeah. Well, and that rings true with my model of vulnerability. If I can continue to be wholehearted, because it takes two people to be vulnerable.
Yes.
You and I are both coming to this conversation wholehearted.
Yes.
What if I went into a conversation and the other person has an angry heart, or a wounded heart,
Yes.
and they're casting out things that would turn me off, that would push me away. But if I can stand there and remain wholehearted, eventually there's only one place that other person can end up, and that's wholehearted too. To get below that surface, to get down to the heart of the matter.
Yes. The other option could be just a total rejection of you because you're making them feel too vulnerable. And that heat shield that they have up is going to thicken, could thicken, is not determined to thicken.
It's the truth that they don't want to see.
They don't want to see, so that it's part of like Campbell's idea of refusing the call. One's called, but they're saying, not now. I'm too busy, call me back. But also because you're making me feel vulnerable, and that is really scary.
Piercing through that surface.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Oh, go ahead.
Please.
Okay.
Well, no, you go, please.
Okay. You wrote this article recently.
Yes.
What was the motivation? I mean, not motivation. What was the inspiration behind writing the article? I mean, first, talk a little bit about what the article was about. I know trust, but take it a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah. So I have a copy from the newspaper here. I think of feeling one morning here in my study with a candle lit and my little gooseneck lamp lit, and thinking how part of the divisiveness in our country, but I think also on a global psychic level, is being fed daily by distrusting one another. And I thought, well, what is this thing of trust? So I started to think about examples and how there are boards of trustees, how on our money it says, "In God we trust."
Right.
And getting ready for today, I thought of that show. I can't remember how long ago it was on, but it was tremendously popular and successful, and it was entitled "Who Do You Trust?" And the show would have couples on, and they would ask the wife questions about the husband and the husband of the wife. And the nation was mesmerized, not the nation, but a lot of audience present were mesmerized by listening to this couple that'd been married 2 years, 25 years. And what is it that you don't trust about her? Or, I mean, it was,
wow.
It could have been light, but it often got heavy. And how one or the other couple in the couple was surprised to learn something about trust, or its absence, or its uncertainty, its wobbliness in the other. So I just wanted to add that because I thought about it maybe an hour before we got on this conversation.
I bet you there were some divorce attorneys watching that real close.
Oh, I bet you, and recording it best they could. You got it. So I say in the article, I think of trust as the heartbeat. I mean, we're speaking about the heart, and I'm so glad that we are. It's the heartbeat of any authentic relationship. So a fundamental question we might ask, I suggest in the article, is not so much, is this person loyal? But a deeper question, is this person trustworthy? Is this person worthy of my trust? And if I'm open, reciprocally, is that true? And I push it a little bit to muse on the relationship of trust to truth. I say they're intimate first cousins. Truth suffers a hit, I wrote, when trust is attacked or dismantled. So there's a fragile but still strong relationship between trust and truth. And in our era of distrust, of misinformation, of falsities, it becomes questionable. I have a buddy from high school who I stay in touch with. There's a group of us from our graduating class of 1963 at St. Joseph's Marianist High School in Cleveland. We all graduated in 63. And there's a website and we share stories and so forth. There's about 55 of us that are involved out of a class of 313. Not all of the others have passed, but many have. Mm-hmm. And Bill and I get on the phone occasionally. And I talked to him a few weeks ago, and I was bringing up some national events, and he said, Dennis, I don't have anything to say because I've sworn off my newspaper and I don't watch the news. And I said, so you're not in tune with what? He said, no. And I said, okay, Bill, we've known each other for 150 years. What's going on? He says, I don't trust any of it. I don't trust anything of what I was hearing. And I decided, instead of the roiling around in my head about, do I trust that comment or is that another fabrication? And he said, I just decided to pull the plug. And Bill's not alone. I mean, how many either dig in to what they have come to believe that they trust, and then everything else gets deleted. There are those of us who want to stay open and listen, but try to be discerning on what we're hearing. And that's a fairly impressive group of people as well. But trust itself is on the chopping block. And we're seeing it now go to a global level with the invasion of Ukraine and the response, the heroic response of the Ukrainians, and that they trust Zelensky. And so trust is just, Clay, it's just so all pervasive right now in the culture. I suggest in the article that without trust, a host of demons can invade the gap that's opened by trust's absence. And I won't read all of them, but I'm just going to read 4 or 5 of them. A suspicion of others. When trust disappears, I'm suspicious of, like my friend Bill, he said, I'm suspicious of everything I hear, so I'm going to block it all out. A lust for power that moves into the vacuum that trust's absence has created. An extreme obsession with safety and security, which then spills into what I am going to allow my child to hear in the classroom and what is off limits for him or her to hear. But it's fear-based from my perspective. Another one is a fierce tribalism. We get into these clusters and then we cling out of the fear that is bred by uncertainty. And for you and me today, can I learn to trust uncertainty? I didn't think about that until after our lunch, and I was musing at home. And in saying that, I want to feel into, is uncertainty a mentor that I have not really allowed in to mentor me, but maybe I should now? And I'll read one more, or 2 more. One is intolerance. When trust is pushed to lowercase, intolerance goes to a capital I, uppercase I. Extremism, rigid control, and these aren't in order of extremity, but the last one I mentioned is self-doubt. When I'm surrounded by a field of mistrust and distrust, it's not a quantum leap psychologically, even mythically, to begin to self-distrust.
Yeah.
Can I even trust my decision here in voting in the primaries?
Right.
So it's a toxicity like an invisible toxic gas, and we're all breathing it. And I just wanted to bring it into consciousness through these 620 words of an op-ed piece.
It was a beautiful op-ed. I
Thank you
want,
so much.
sure. I want to go back to uncertainty.
Yes, good.
That just rings so loudly in your muse about trusting uncertainty.
Yes.
I'd like to peel the onion on that a little bit. Where does that, how does that play out?
Yeah.
One word that comes to me is faith.
Faith.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, if I can share this, because you and I are on the same wavelength here, I was thinking, and I mentioned in the article, along with faith, hope, and love, I want to say there's a fourth that prescribes a quaternity, and that is trust. So I started to think about faith, hope, and love, and I pushed that a little bit, and I want to share it with you and listeners. In faith, I trust in what can't be seen, measured, but sense its presence on a super sensible level. Hope. Hope allows me to trust in the future, to see possibilities I may contribute to in their unfolding. And then love, to trust in the awareness of how all need to feel loved, acknowledged, respected, and maybe most importantly, Clay, witnessed. People have this deep desire, and I share it, to be witnessed by others. And I think that's a form of love.
Boy, you really struck something there in me, in our men's circle. There's an underlying theme, and I think I plucked it out because it was something that was so important to me at the time, early on. This pleading, this inner pleading of, I just want to be heard. I just want to be heard.
Yeah.
I don't need anybody to fix me or make suggestions or tell me their war story. I just want to be heard, and that's a desperate cry, and that's what I read. That's how I hear what you're saying.
And if I may, because it's beautiful what you just said, that's the plea of Eros.
Oh.
I think that's the plea of Eros.
Say more.
I want to be in relationship to, and I can't unless I feel heartfelt that I'm being heard, that I'm being witnessed. So I'm liking what's happening here with Eros, who kind of slipped into this conversation early on and is kind of hanging on to us, which is beautiful. That Eros is that impulse to be heard. And I think it's appropriate to go to the other side and to witness others, which is also an erotic move.
Yeah.
And, something I'm reading recently, The Stories We Live By, Dan McAdams. I'm typing some notes on personal myth. He says what he discovered in his research is that somebody sensing that they are deeply and intensely being listened to is one of the greatest gifts that one human being can give to the other.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm speaking and I'm listening, and as you and I work, we listen to each other. That is a human gift that I think is sacred on in several ways that we could push.
So true. I want to come back to
Yeah.
Faith.
Yes.
In creating my mandala over the years that's hanging behind me,
Yeah, I love it.
I take religious tradition, and the one common theme that Karen Armstrong calls out, the common theme amongst all the major religious traditions in the world is the Golden Rule, which translates to compassion.
Yes.
And so I'm associating compassion with religious tradition and mythology. And I've been able to blur the lines between religious tradition and mythology. You know, they're communicating a wisdom forward.
That's right.
And so, in juxtaposition with religious tradition and compassion, with mythology, I associate the word faith.
Mm-hmm.
And the relationship then between faith and compassion is love.
Yes.
Now, how does that play into our conversation? I don't know. It was just an observation that popped in mind when we were talking about faith.
Good. Yeah. Is faith simultaneous with trust? Moved by the energies of compassion, and I'm raising my voice into a question at the end because I'm not sure. I was just seeing if I said anything else on. Now, I don't know if this will help, but one insight that I was coming to off of the article, it's not in the article, that trust sets up less a contract between oneself and others and more a compact, a common pact with oneself and others. It seems to me that having a contract with someone else, you could be married to, but there's no compact. Maybe it was there at the beginning and it faded. I
Contract.
think
I'm sorry.
No, please.
Contract is head. Compact is heart.
That's it. Yeah, you anticipated. That's where
that's where you're going.
And that's great that you finished that sentence.
Yeah.
And it's a pact with the commonplace of both of us. And as I get older, the commonplace and the ordinary is far more interesting than the extraordinary. Yeah. And I think that ordinariness of love is extravagant in a kind of paradoxical way.
I wouldn't think of love as ordinary, but how you put it there is very interesting.
I'm resonating a little bit with, I'm going to forget the name, I'm going to forget her name, lives in Wyoming, Montana. She wrote a book years ago called Ordinarily Sacred. Her name's not going to come up. The title is accurate. When I read that, I thought, this is 2 decades ago or more. I thought, maybe I should be paying more attention to the ordinary. And then that kind of dropped out of consciousness. But as I'm getting further into elderhood, rather than getting older, the ordinary has an extravagant quality about it. And that's how I'm using that sense of love. Love is maybe an appreciation of the ordinary. One facet of it, because love's complexity is huge. But, I just find myself watching people and interacting with people, and people doing small gestures of courtesy, helping one another out in ordinary ways, but it's love moving in the world, and in a compassionate way, Clay.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I think it's one of love's manifestations in the world, that it moves by means of the ordinary, or moves through the ordinary, or makes the ordinary sacred. Linda, I almost had her last name. Doggone it. But the title is it, and it's a small book, and it was just a profound meditation.
And the name of the book again is
Ordinarily Sacred.
Ordinarily Sacred.
Yeah, it's just, and somewhere it's buried in these stacks of books. But I think that was playing in the background for me a little bit when I said what I did about the ordinariness of love. And the best movie in my limited repertoire is that magnificent film with Roy Duvall, entitled Tender Mercies. And it's the one who made it is famous, and and the essay on that film is in one of my recent books. It might be I think it's in the Way of Myth, but it's the highlighting of a alcoholic country western singer who begins to sober up, finds himself in a motel room fighting over a bottle of bourbon with another alcoholic, and then settling in and asking, can I earn my room and board, and I'll fix the doors and so forth. This is in Waxahachie, Texas, incidentally, where it was filmed. Flat. And the woman is raising her son, who's about 9. Her husband had been killed in Vietnam, and she's got a couple of gas pumps out front. She sells a few things in the store. And this is where his redemptive journey towards sobriety, which brings out his creativity again, and he begins writing songs, and then he starts playing just in a little way with this band that just idolizes him and comes to visit him in their Volkswagen van and says, you're one of our mentors in song, and please come and sing with us. He said no, because he wasn't ready. But it's the ordinary that saves him.
And it's the return of self-trust.
Absolutely.
Within himself. Dennis, this conversation could go on almost as long as our lunches go on. but I want to bring this one to a close for the time being.
That's fine. Absolutely.
Let me share with you just one last thought.
Yeah.
Now it's resonating with me why the article that you wrote on trust, and why the whole topic of trust touched me so incredibly deeply.
Oh, thank you.
And and the reason it did, and I didn't realize it until I pulled up my mandala on my computer here while we were talking to discuss this or that, and I'm looking around my mandala, which began years and years and years ago and has evolved throughout time. The word trust is nowhere on that mandala. And that really gives me pause. And I'd like to come back and let's continue our conversation next time.
Absolutely, Clay, and thank you. This is, as always, a wonderful, stimulating. I'm surprised at some of the things that I said, which I had not planned, but we got. What we do successfully is we establish a field of relationships and then we move around in it. And that's what's so invigorating
You're
about
so
our
true.
conversations.
It's so true. And this whole search for the new compassionate male, and I've never expressed it this way, but it is. It's creating a field.
Yes.
It is. And that's what I'm sensing. Is there's a field of trust and vulnerability when we go into these conversations.
Yeah.
On these episodes. So thanks for joining me on In Search of the New Compassionate Male. Check out the latest episode of In Search of the New Compassionate Male on your favorite podcast station.